and continuing resolution vote against the U.S. embargo on Cuba. That is history-making. U.S. Ambassador Samantha Power said it's history-making. It shows that the world is against us when it comes to the embargo. I'm actually going to start with you, Congressman Murphy. In an early debate, you said you'd support targeted sanctions against members of the Cuban government. But you didn't say where you stand on the trade embargo itself. Would you vote to lift the U.S. embargo on Cuba?
Yes, well, this is an important question. We did get a chance to talk about this in our last debate. And, I'll tell you the same story I told last time. I know this is a very personal situation for many people. And I have some Cuban relatives. Some are here this evening. And I have talked to them at length about this. And I understand this is personal. But I also believe we've had a policy in place for over 50 years that hasn't worked. Right? It's only empowered the Castro regime. I want to help the Cuban people out. And I don't believe that anybody does democracy like America. So let's make sure we are providing more opportunity for those Cuban people. Would we rather see, our own cruise ships, Royal Caribbean and Carnival there in Havana? Or would we rather see Russian spy ships there? And we can do more to not only protect our country on a national security basis, but help the Cuban people out. So I would continue to ensure that we do have targeted sanctions against the Castro regime and those that have had terrible human rights violations, and believe that we have to move toward normalization. I don't think we can do this overnight, but we have to continue down that road to help the Cuban people.
Senator? Actually, I'm not sure if the congressman is aware of this. Probably isn't. But what the president did 2 weeks ago removed even further sanctions. Members of the Communist Party and the government in Cuba are now eligible for remittances for the first time in our history. Those are not targeted sanctions. That's a massive opening in exchange for nothing in return. The second point is what happened at the UN today is nothing short of lawlessness. Whether you agree with embargo or not, that is the law of the United States. And the refusal of this administration to enforce that at the United Nations and stand up for that is lawlessness. If you don't like the policy, work to change it. I know that's what they're trying to do. But I'm going to tell you, you can't just ignore the law of this country the way this administration habitually does. And as far as the opening is concerned, cruise ships, basically an invasion of cruise ships is going to bring democracy to Cuba? It is not, because the Cuban government is a dictatorship. We have now made over 2 years concession after concession to the Castro regime. They have taken not even a quarter step towards democracy, not even a quarter step. And by the way, Congressman, on the same day that the president announced that we were now going to be allowing the full sale of cigars and rum from Cuba, you know what the Cuban government did that very same week? They invited the Russians to open a base on the island of Cuba for the first time in 30 years. This is not working. A better model would have been to do what they did with Myanmar or Burma, which is for every step they took towards democracy, we took a step in towards the sanctions relief. This is an all one-way deal. And by the way, in Cuba today, there are still people living there who stole your Medicare money. They're fugitives of American justice, harbored by the Castro government. A cop killer lives on the island of Cuba today. For 35 years, Joanne Chesmar murdered a trooper in New Jersey, and the Cuban government continues to protect her. None of that was discussed in this deal. It is a crazy, broken deal that needs to be revisited because it is rewarding the Castro regime and asking nothing in return on human rights or on the dignity or freedom of the Cuban people.
Congressman Murphy.
Yes, and Senator, I do appreciate your efforts on cracking down there. But just this very weekend, Donald Trump was on a Sunday morning show here in Miami. And when asked about violating the Cuban embargo, he basically admitted that he did it. Senator, we know this is one of your core issues, and I'm not trying to be critical because I do respect your position. But the person you chose to be our next president has basically admitted he violated the embargo, and you continue to stand by his side despite this being one of your core initiatives that you care about. So what's it going to take for you to unendorse Donald Trump? Is there anything he can do or say at this point that you will not continue to support him?
That's bizarre. Congressman Murphy, you're criticizing Donald Trump for supporting a position that you have. You support lifting the embargo.
I'm criticizing you for not having the courage,
so finally,
Senator.
Patrick Murphy agrees
you
with
have
Donald
no
Trump
backbone.
On Cuba.
I would ask the audience to please refrain. We're only about 10 minutes away. You can applaud all you like.
Look, the bottom line is that at this moment, moving forward when it comes to Cuba, it is important for us to have leverage. The Cuban leadership is in their mid-80s, which means, according to actuarials, they're not going to be around much longer. And our hope is that they will be replaced by a new generation of leadership that is open to making steps forward. The problem is this, my friends, that there is no precedent in human history for tourism, or for that matter, full economic engagement as being the sole catalyst for democracy in a country resistant to democracy. The Cuban government is not interested in democracy. They're interested in dollars. They want dollars to be able to fund their repressive regime. They want more money to be able to leave what's in place now permanent. And they want us to accept it as a legitimate form of government. And I ask you this, Congressman, why are the Cuban people the only people in this hemisphere that cannot vote for their leaders?
That is your time on this question.